A very good morning to all of you. Yeah.
Yeah. If you stand and speak.
So, welcome to the Dean's 70th Anniversary Lecture Series of the School of International Studies. I think by now most of us know that the lectures are a part of the celebration of the completion of 70 years of our school, an initiative that Professor Amitabh Mattu, our Dean, had taken. We trace our antecedents, that is, the antecedents of the School of International Studies, to October 1955. That is when the Indian School of International Studies came into being at Sapru House in ICWA, the Indian Council of World Affairs. And this is even before JNU was established. It was merged later with JNU in 1970 as the School of International Studies. This is the 10th lecture in the series. We have had 9 lectures so far on various issues, subjects, international studies. We had discussions on the Nobel Prize in Economics, on international law, on India's development, its foreign policy, on China's foreign policy, on West Asia, human rights, etc. These lectures have been delivered by former professors of our school, reputed international analysts, and academics. Today, we are very pleased to welcome Dr. Madhu Khanna, a distinguished professor of environmental economics. And she's also the director of the Institute of Sustainability, Energy and Environment at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. She'll be speaking to us on artificial intelligence-based digital technologies for sustainable agriculture. Very interesting and very interesting theme. So before we begin, I request Professor Amitabh Mattu to felicitate our guest with a token of our appreciation. I will now request the chairperson of CITD, Professor Mandira Sharma, to please introduce.
Can I just say a few words because I need to leave? But
Yeah, sure.
I just think, first of all, Professor Preeti Singh, who's the custodian of the SIS brand and convener of the lecture series. Uh, over these 70 years, I think one of the most important tasks that we have achieved, quite apart from my alumni and quite apart from our distinguished faculty, is that the SIS brand stands for something. It stands for scholarly excellence. It stands for a commitment to academia, to the academy, and to the highest principles of academic scholarship. Through all these years, through ups and downs, I think we have been able to sustain that brand. And it's a tribute to that brand that we are now celebrating in 70 years of sustained excellence. And as Professor Preeti Singh said, we've had distinguished academics. And this is one lecture series where the focus is on academics, not policymakers, not ambassadors, not the people from the media who might have a wider appeal, but solid academics. And I'm delighted and honored to be here, and I shall be watching the live streaming on YouTube of that we have someone of the eminence of Professor Madhu Khanna, who, as you just heard, is a distinguished professor at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, where I had the great pleasure of spending a few months in the winter of 1995-96. And as Professor Madhu Khanna uh, said, that since that winter of 1996, there's never been a winter as harsh as that winter. But in that harshness of that winter, and there was a warmth in that place, in that university, and I took a course which is particularly relevant here on quantitative techniques and research methodology, which was a 3-month program. In fact, stimulated by Professor Ashok Gua, who was then the dean. So I had learned about how the usefulness of quantitative techniques was to people who didn't specialize in mathematics or who were, as I say, failed mathematicians, which are economists. That's a joke. But anyway, I am delighted and honored to be here and to welcome Professor Madhu Khanna. I'm sure your lecture will not just be heard by the audience here, but lots and lots of people elsewhere. And we look forward to also collaborating with you institutionally over the next years, um, to build a relationship amongst academics at a time when you in the United States are facing great challenges, in fact, far greater challenges than any other country in the world. But we can play at least a supportive role in ensuring that academics stands above all for objectivity, integrity, and excellence. With those words, may I request Professor Mandira Sharma to take over.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's my great pleasure and honor to introduce our speaker today, and also to be the chair of this session. Professor Madhu Khanna is ACES Distinguished Professor of Environmental Economics at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. She is also holding the position of Associate Director of the Institute of Sustainability, Energy and Environment in UIUC. Professor Khanna has worked on diverse areas, ranging from technology adoption, agro-environmental policy analysis, voluntary approaches to environmental protection and land use, markets and greenhouse gas, implications of biofuels, etc. And more recently, she has been conducting interdisciplinary research analyzing the economic and land use implications of large-scale production of biofuels from the next generation of bioenergy crops, that is, perennial grasses and crop residues, etc., and the intended and unintended impacts of these biofuels on greenhouse gas emissions and water quality. So these are very, very interesting and important, pertinent areas of interest, research interest, as far as environmental economics goes. Professor Khanna has also authored numerous articles, more than 150 to 100. I stopped counting beyond a point. And she's also the author of 2 books. She has been recipient of several awards and accolades and has been editors of many academic journals of repute. It's my pleasure and honor to welcome you, Professor Khanna, to this session of Dean's Lecture Series at SIS while we celebrate the 70th year of SIS. Professor Khanna will be delivering a lecture on AI-based digital technologies for sustainable agriculture. And without much ado, I would invite you to deliver your lecture. Over to you, Professor Khanna.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for that kind introduction.
Sorry.
Yeah, thank you all for coming. It's a real pleasure and honor to be here for this historic lecture series. I always enjoy coming back to Delhi, and I studied here. I did my undergraduate and my master's at Delhi University, Delhi School of Economics, taught there for a couple of years, and so it's always wonderful to come back. So my talk is going to focus on applications of artificial intelligence technologies in agriculture, with the aim of looking at whether these kind of technologies can improve the sustainability of agriculture. So as we all know, agriculture worldwide faces a major global challenge, which is how do we continue to increase the amount of food production to keep up with the growing population, and not only growing population, but growing income, which is leading to growing demand for protein and so on. And that without necessarily increasing the amount of land is coming into crop production, because there is a limited amount of land, there's lots of demand for land, so there's limited potential to increase the amount of land in agriculture. So essentially we have to increase productivity from the existing cropland. And as you can see from this graph, unlike the 60s when we had the Green Revolution, and a lot of the increase in productivity was because of and better crop varieties, in the later decades, most of this increase has been coming because of increased efficiency and efficiency in agriculture, and the focus on providing low-cost food and dealing with food security. A major challenge is that agriculture imposes a lot of costs on the environment, and through various ways. And this is not just in any one country, this is a global phenomena. Everywhere it's the same story. There's a lot of chemical pollution because of fertilizers and pesticides. There is agriculture is one of the biggest uses, I don't know, 70% of fresh water for agricultural production. A lot of that water is actually wasted because of the way that irrigation is conducted, and then it causes pollution and it causes quality problems. The soil is tilled intensively, and it causes soil erosion, soil degradation. There's a lot of carbon emissions generated in the process of planting and harvesting, and land use change. Land is cleared, there's deforestation. Animal agriculture generates a lot of methane. So overall, agriculture puts a lot of cost on the environment. And of course, biodiversity loss because we clear up natural land. And so one of the major causes of these environmental problems is the fact that agriculture uses a lot of nitrogen, and often the nitrogen use is far greater than what the crops actually need. And so this map here shows across all these different countries how much extra nitrogen is actually being applied than is actually used. And that's for various reasons, that farmers want to apply nitrogen. They don't want to be caught short of nitrogen. So there's a tendency, and nitrogen has typically been cheap, and so, in India it's been subsidized, so there's a tendency to over-apply. And the other challenge is that the actual nitrogen use efficiency, that means of the nitrogen that is applied, the amount that is actually taken up by the crop is only about 40 to 50, 60%. So the remaining 40 to 60% is actually then left in the soil, or it runs off and it contaminates the water and causes drinking water and water quality problems. The other problem is soil degradation. Again, it's a global phenomena. Agriculture is very rough in terms of intensity of tillage and depleting the soil organic matter and causing not only over time loss of soil productivity, but also the carbon that is stored in the soil gets released and it causes global warming. So what is the solution to that, right? So we want to continue to increase crop yield, but we don't want to continue to have these environmental damages. And so the idea is to have something called sustainable intensification. That is, we want to increase, right? So how should we do that? And there are sort of three main to do that. The first is by increasing the efficiency with which these inputs are used. Of you having a nitrogen use efficiency of only 40%, if you could increase that, then with the same amount of nitrogen, you could get a higher yield, segregation, and so on. And one of the major reasons that prevents us from doing that is the land is actually, the fields are actually very spatially heterogeneous. They differ a lot in terms of the amount that they actually need, the quality of the soil, the slope, and there's so many variations in the land that applying the same input everywhere is not actually a good idea. But we really lack the technology to know how we should apply inputs in a way that we can increase efficiency. The second way is to substitute non-chemical inputs for chemical inputs. So instead of having pesticides and fertilizers that are polluting, that are made out of petroleum products, that we'll talk about. And then the third approach is by redesigning agriculture. So agriculture in most places tends to be very monoculture. You'll just see wheat, or you'll see rice, or you'll see corn and soybeans, over millions and millions of acres. And that causes a lot of problems. But what we need is to have diversification and crop rotations that are actually, improve the fertility of the soil, get rid of the natural ways of getting rid of pests, and many other ways that we can actually redesign the way that the agricultural landscape is set up. So the question is, how can AI help in this process, right? And there are really two major problems that it is not possible, or it's very challenging for human labor to address and conventional technologies to address. The first one is figuring out exactly how much input should be applied in each part of the field. And we're talking about small sections of the field. Even within a field, there is so much variability that we'd like to be able to apply different inputs in different sections of the field. And there's also the need for inputs varies over time. If it's if it's raining or if it is a wet year, you may need different amounts of fertilizer. If it is a dry year, you need different amounts. So this has to be determined every year. And then we have to figure out. So this figure at the bottom shows that the typical way that farmers everywhere is they put a same amount of nitrogen over the entire field. But you really want to apply different amounts, not only in sections of the field, but ultimately the goal is you could give every plant could be given its own spoon of nitrogen when the plant needs it, right? So, and then to make sure that whatever is actually applied is taken up by the plant and not left in the ground or wasted. And this requires not only knowing what is the condition of the soil, it requires knowing what the weather is, what it's going to be like, and also, what the, not in addition to that, you need to know the market conditions, what are the prices of different things, what needs to be applied when, and so on. You can prevent over application in some parts of the field and under application in other parts of the field. And that way you can increase productivity and reduce waste and one challenge, which is very difficult to do, by just conventional agriculture or by human beings alone. The second problem is that no matter how much labor we may have, but no amount of labor can actually monitor a plant, or if you're looking at livestock and animals 24/7, right? You could put a camera and you can actually watch on the camera how the plant is growing, what are the field conditions, how is the wind blowing, or what the animals need, and so on, and tailor your method of treatment to them possible, by human beings. Human beings find it very difficult if you had to go into the fields and remove weeds manually or using integrated pest management to do it, scouting for weeds and so on. But at large scale, that's not possible. And so that's why we use chemicals, because it's easy to just spray the chemicals and deal with the weeds. Also understanding the soil health at that fine resolution and figuring out how to make recommendations. And so being the ability to do this precision management of crops and animals is what has this potential it's possible with AI, has this possibility of increasing productivity and reducing waste and pollution. So these new and emerging digital and AI technologies is now sort of referred to as the fourth agricultural revolution. After the green revolution, then we had the gene, the biotech revolution, and then there was precision farming. But really, this new technology, this is not it's sort of a continuum of, we've had technologies starting, discovered how to apply GPS to agriculture and figure out how to geocode what's. So it's not a completely new technology, but it's just sort of getting better, and ability to use large amounts of data and gather the data and then use that data and analyze it to make decisions. That's what's sort of new about it. So there's technologies, mobile technologies, cell phones, internet, cloud computing, analysis of large amounts of data and all that. GPS, harvesting and other technologies that are equipped with the ability to apply inputs at different rates as it goes through the field and so on. So these technologies exist and are there. And similarly for livestock, you can monitor and put tags on them and then keep tracks on that. So part of, many of these technologies exist and are improving. But what's really been lacking is our ability to understand how to respond to spatial variability. Even though we can measure, we know that there is spatial variability in the field, the biggest challenge is knowing, well, if you see that there is variability, how much nitrogen should you put? When should you put it? And so on. And that requires understanding how crops respond to inputs. And that knowledge, even though we've been doing agriculture for centuries, is surprisingly limited. So what this digital technologies offers is this incredible ability to take large amounts, vast amounts of data, machine learning and other techniques to understand the cause and effect relationship between inputs to understand how, and based on that, to develop recommendations for what farmers should do under different weather conditions, under different growing conditions, and so on. And ultimately, the goal is to be able to apply inputs tailored to each plant, to understand the health of each plant and the management of the plant. And so this picture is not really very far from what the reality is currently developing to be, where you can have these small robots which can actually go into the field and apply inputs specifically tailored to each plant, to the software to be able to read the conditions of the plant, the needs of the plant, and then apply inputs as they're going. Okay, so having this, both the knowledge as well as the technology that can and autonomy. So again, this is something that no human being can do. This requires autonomous machinery that can be given instructions and then can carry those out. So you have this corn that is growing, and this robot can go underneath the corn plants as they're standing during the growing season, remove weeds. And so instead of using pesticides and herbicides, you can actually mechanically remove weeds without causing problems. Okay, and this is a low labor intensity, high efficiency, and environmentally friendly solution. Okay. Another issue, this is of course specific to the Midwest, where unlike of course India, where you have year-round farming of something or the other all the time, in the US it's too cold. Between November and April, you cannot plant anything because there's snow on the ground in the Midwest. And so farmers typically leave that land bare. And when you have bare land, it's subject to leaching and erosion, and it's not sequestering carbon. You're not planting these cover crops that would keep the land and that can provide a lot of ecosystem benefits. Now, of course, that requires additional labor and time that they have to go in November when it is already getting cold. And so this robots and drones are being developed, which can then apply these, go and spread the seed of the cover crop, even when the crop is standing early in July and August, when the weather is better. And then, so this is a robot that is going under in the cornfield while the corn is still growing, and it's spreading the seed, so that by the time, the crop is harvested in October, you already have a green cover on the soil. And this can improve soil health, it can increase soil organic matter, and reduce nitrogen leaching, and so on. And similarly, these kind of drones are being developed that can make it a lot easier to go and spread seeds. And I mean, drones are now being used even for irrigation, spreading pesticides, and they can be given the map, and they know exactly how to, what they need to do and where. So ultimately, the future is going to look like having these small robots. These are autonomous robots and a whole team of robots that would then be operating in the field and spreading seeds, monitoring plant health, dealing with the big challenge is how to reduce crop loss because of pests. And so these robots can measure plant health. They can detect problems before they start and do it with a high level of precision that is not possible otherwise. In addition to that, the ability to use satellite data and a variety of different combinations of satellite and remote sensing data can actually help in measuring exactly what's happening on the soil and what is the quality of the soil, and based on that to develop recommendations for how to deal with it. And then another major technology that's being developed is something called digital twin technology. So digital twin technology is this idea that you have a real farm, which is the one that is shown on the left, that it has the land, you have your machinery, you have the animals, you have everything, and then you have an exact replica of that, on a digital replica on your computer. On the farm manager has it on their computer. And so if they want to make any changes, they want to try a new experiment, they can try that on their computer and then see what the outcomes will be before they need to actually try it out in the farm. And by doing that, they can prevent costly mistakes. So the idea is to have, and the way that this is obviously done is through having a lot of, sensors and monitors on the field that are all the time providing information about everything that's happening there to the computer. And so a lot of the interventions can be done digitally and then done in practice. So this is a way to better understand how the farm is functioning, where there are problems, how to prevent them, and how to respond to them. It's also not only agriculture, animal farming, where instead of just leaving the animals and not being able to keep track of them, there are ways now that you can actually animals and monitor them 24/7 using digital technologies. At the bottom is this robotic dog, which can be used to herd the animals and to manage them instead of and allow for like rotational grazing. So you keep all the animals in different parts of the field and in a way that improves the health of the pasture and is taking care of the animals. Similarly here, you can have cameras that are monitoring the animals 24/7. You can see their health, you can see what their nutritional needs are, and any changes that need to be made to their diet or their care in order to have more healthy livestock. Okay. And then another application is you all are probably familiar with ChatGPT and Bing, Copilot and all of that, which is essentially ways to use generative AI for information, for all kinds of things. Similarly, that's being developed for agriculture. So there's so much information that is available that is hard to access, but with that generative AI for agriculture, you can actually just go and query, you can find out what you should do, you can get recommendations and things like that. So that's another application. So all of this looks like, well, that's maybe only in the developed countries or in the US, but it's actually AI is really catching on in a big way in India. And so there's this vision to have make AI and make it serve India, and significant amount of money being spent there. This chat bot, which I just described in the US context, is another one being developed also in India that would help farmers get information that they need. And really the big issues about how do we monitor crop health, reduce the loss of crop yield because of pests and diseases and so on. There is work that's going on to be able to do that here as well. So this is sort of examples from India where you can have these, pay for use technologies. So you can actually, the big New York Times article where the farmers, and a lot of this is app based, and farmers can over here as well. And at the bottom is dogs that are being developed at IIT Kanpur. And this is an interesting video that you can actually just Google and you can watch how the real dogs are responding to the robotic dogs. But the same technologies are available, and obviously everywhere right now they're at pretty pilot stages, but India is not far behind. Digital technology for crop protection, where the farmers can use it with their cell phone to look at which weeds are there, which diseases are there, and what solutions they need to apply in order to deal with those problems. Okay. A major problem in India is this post-harvest loss, and that happens because farmers are not often able to find buyers at the right time and the right prices, and so they lose a lot of the yield even after it is produced. And so this is a technology that has been developed to match farmers with buyers, and also to give them all kinds of digital advice about the quality of the product, how they should be producing it, what technology for sowing and harvesting and so on. That is all based on the mobile sort of phones. And again, this suggests that millions of farmers are already using this technology. So the availability of these technologies, raises a lot of questions, right? First one is, which farmers are going to be most likely to adopt these technologies? What are the barriers? What would be the incentives? Which technologies are going to be more likely? As I said, there's a huge range of such technologies that are available. And then importantly, which technologies will actually improve environmental sustainability, which is a question that we started with, not just yield, because we know, yield is one important part of the problem, but we also want to make it more sustainable. What are the equity implications of having these technologies, and what are the risks associated with these technologies? Okay. So there's a huge literature in economics that has been studying, how farmers decide which technologies to adopt, not only in developed countries, but also developing countries. And there's many factors that we can go into. Profitability is, at the end of the day, that bottom line matters to everybody. And so these technologies that are more costly, that are, will only be adopted if they lead to some benefits, if they're saving inputs, if they are, increasing yield, and so on. And for these kind of technologies, the greater the variability, the more the incentive is obviously an important factor. That's a huge factor, not knowing for sure how these technologies will perform. And then there's uncertainty about what, not only about their performance, but what will be the returns to these technologies in the future. It depends on market conditions and so on. Many people would like to wait rather than invest now. So there's often delay in adoption because of uncertainty. These technologies offer the return from your equipment, and so farmers' willingness to wait. And then education, literacy also is, of course, important. And then most of these technologies are typically adopted first by larger farmers who have more access to resources and so on. So this basically, if you look across the literature, see sort of patterns that are similar everywhere, with larger farm size, with greater, better quality. Farmers that already have access to computers and internet and so on are more likely to adopt these kind of technologies. Availability of skilled labor, knowing that these technologies will provide a benefit, education, attitudes, and pressure from neighbors and other farmers. Sort of a demonstration effect is often very important. But there are also a lot of barriers to the adoption of these technologies. I mean, cost is one of them. But what is really new about these technologies is that they require sharing data. So as with the cell phone, we are sharing a lot of our data and private information. With these technologies, because they're all digital, they're tracking what is the condition of the farm and what the farmer is doing. That information is all available. And there is a lot of concern about giving up that information to the people who are providing the technology. So the big question is data governance, privacy, and data security. Who owns this data? How will this data be used? Can it be used against the farmer for regulation or other things? As a big factor. The other one is the fact that these technologies become like black boxes. They have a mind of their own. And the farmer loses control. Once you let the robot go and apply inputs and deal with the farming, the farmer who has years of experience knowing what to do and what he's been always doing no longer is able to do that. So there's fear about letting go of their livelihood in the hands of robots. Access to the internet, access to technical assistance, and so on. It also now changes the decision making for the farmer. So it's now they have to deal with figuring out which technology out of this range should be adopted. How if should they adopt robots? How many robots? If you have small robots in the field, how many to adopt? How frequently should you send them out? At which, for example, if you have weeding robots, at what stage of the resistance, should you wait till the field is completely filled with resistant weeds, or should you send them in early? So there's many choices. You own or rent, should you use those pay for use services, or actually own the robots, and so on. So those are some of the questions that will come up. Looking sort of at what is the current rate of adoption, what is the status? So this sort of looks at adoption of mobile phones, and it's obviously like a decade old. Even in countries like in Asia and Africa and all that, mobile phone technology caught up very, and within a short period of time, even in India, we know everybody has a mobile phone, right? And has had for a long time. I mean, even the rickshawalas have a phone. On the other hand, the access to the internet has been much slower, right? So some technologies spread very fast, and other technologies take a lot of time to spread. And then the question is, which types of technologies get adopted first and which ones don't? So if we look at the adoption of GPS and these auto-guided equipment, autonomous, equipment, autonomous cars, the adoption of that has really caught up in the US. I mean, this is, a few years old, but currently about 80% of the farms in the US at least are using auto-guided equipment. And that provides a lot of benefits because instead of having the farmer go up and down the field, spreading the seed and cutting the crop, you can actually have an auto-guided tractor that can do it, and the farmer just needs to sit and let the tractor do the job. So it reduces fatigue, it reduces the need to do repetitive tasks, and it increases the accuracy because the machine is actually more accurate than the human being. Okay. On the other hand, the adoption of technologies that can, like I said, to deal with spatial heterogeneity, that has been relatively 30% of the farmers actually adopt that technology. And so this is a case where technology that could potentially be environmentally beneficial actually has a low rate of adoption because the to adopt those technologies is not there. The technology is costly, and the farmers don't see the benefit of reducing input use by adopting. Adoption of weeding robots is still slow, but I mean, these robots are still being developed in many cases, and it's emerging. But this is sort of showing in the US the dealers, number of technology providers that are actually providing these robots that can do weeding and scouting and soil sampling and things like that. So it is a growing field, but many of these things are still pretty new. And that's similar if you look across different countries. These are two examples from Europe and UK, where, again, you can see here that the technologies that are the first to be adopted are those that reduce labor intensity, that benefit the farmer by reducing the amount of labor that's required. So GPS and those kind of autonomous technologies get adopted faster. But technologies that are going to reduce nitrogen use and improve efficiency are much slower to be adopted. So the question is, can AI lead to sustainable agriculture? And the point is that just having these technologies doesn't guarantee that they will be used to improve the sustainability of agriculture. Farmers are, like all individuals, are more likely to adopt technologies that provide them private benefits, increasing yield, reducing labor costs, and increasing profitability. And in some cases, those private benefits can also lead to environmental benefits. And so this is an example of a field where you can see that the area in red is one where it is not profitable to put a lot of nitrogen because it's a very poor quality soil. It also causes a lot of nitrogen leaching. So that would be a place where the farmer benefits by using variable rate technology and reduces costs and benefits the environment. But often these kind of win-win solutions are not there. In most cases, you need to, there's an additional cost of dealing with environmental problems. And unless there is a regulation or an incentive, it's not going to happen. So weeding robots, for example, may not be necessarily adopted to reduce herbicide use and unless there is high weed pressure, high resistance, or there are regulations to make farmers take care of it. So one of the big challenges with agriculture is how do you deal with agricultural pollutions? So unlike coming from, you can penalize the pollution. In the case of agriculture, it's non-point pollution. So you don't know which farmer the runoff come from, where did the contamination come from, or which farmer used too much pesticide and caused air quality problems, and so on. And so, and because of that, we cannot also find it an easy way to reward the farmers that adopt better technologies, because we don't have that information. We can't observe and measure and monitor who is providing ecosystem services damages. And so that's kind of a global challenge. And is what the policies typically is to subsidize farmers, to give them subsidies to adopt better practices. And those subsidies are given to all the farmers that adopt a practice, no matter whether they are actually benefiting the environment or they, or not. So it's a very costly way to try to get to environmental benefits, not what would be preferable is if you could target the subsidies, if you could measure and know exactly which farmer is doing what and how that's impacting the environment, and give subsidies that are providing those benefits. So we know that the way to reach, to really achieve environmental benefits at lowest cost is to have the actual price of these inputs factored into to have the environmental cost of these inputs factored into the price. So the price of fertilizer should not just be the price of producing it. It should include the fact that it causes global warming, that it causes nitrogen leaching, and you want to put those into the price of the fertilizer so that people recognize that and use less fertilizer. But you don't want to necessarily make fertilizer expensive for all farmers. You want to make fertilizer expensive for those farmers which may be located next to a water body or next to a lake or a river where fertilizer causes a problem. So these subsidies need to be site-specific and farmer-specific. And so that's where the challenge is of designing these policies. So reducing the risks of adoption is another thing. Policies have to deal with that in order to encourage greater adoption. And then we need to provide education, technical assistance to enable adoption and alternative practices being practiced. So really quickly at the end, just want to talk about some of the equity impacts. Of course, these technologies can provide benefits to farmers because they can improve working conditions. And these are small robots that are being developed, so they don't have the same issue that only large farmers can adopt them. Even small farmers can adopt them. But the question is still that the risk is that the larger, better off farmers are more likely to adopt. And so this could worsen this digital divide between large and small farmers. There is the danger of loss of jobs for farm workers, the need for changing their reskilling and upskilling. And so a lot needs to happen in order to make sure these technologies are accessible to all farmers, including the small farmers and in areas where you may not have internet access and so on. And so, this is where it's important to develop these AI solutions that are tailored to specific regions, technology providers, and the farmers. So a number of risks one of the big ones is the risk of a cyber attack. If all the farmers you can imagine are using a digital technology or like a computer, we know that you can have a virus that can affect all computers, cause a major problem. Here, you could have a problem where farmers are relying upon this technology to spread their fertilizer, and somebody hacks the software and they over apply fertilizer, or not. There are cases where at the right moment the GPS connection is lost, and then what do you do, and so on. So there's a risk associated with that. So just to end, in general, these technologies have a lot of potential to lead to sustainable agriculture, and even to convert this non-point pollution into a point source pollution, because with these technologies, we could know exactly which farmer is doing what and what problems they're solving or causing. And so these technologies can reduce, emissions, and they can improve livestock management, increase productivity, and help farmers adapt to climate change. But technology availability has to be accompanied by the right policies and regulations, so that there are incentives to adopt the technologies that can actually lead to sustainability, and not, again, just lead to greater profitability for the farmers and greater yield, which has been the typical path so far. So I'm going to stop with that, and hopefully there's time for questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madhu Khanna. It was an excellent overview of the technological challenges and technology-driven sustainable agriculture. You start productivity, increase in agricultural productivity, food security, etc., and how this leads to environmental costs. And then one possible solution or one possible way forward could be the use of technology-driven agricultural methods, which you have very elaborately explained with AgBot and digital dogs and robot dogs and all so on and so forth. I think it was a very interesting discussion on artificial intelligence based digitalization of agricultural activities. So before I open the floor for question and answer, I would just like to highlight that this kind of technology driven agriculture, which is very futuristic in nature, however, somehow seems to miss the point that technology itself can be environmentally damaging, because in the literature on cryptocurrency and Bitcoin, a growing concern has been that the data mining and amount of data mining and generation of the Bitcoin and all, the generation of the Bitcoin trading and all are very highly energy intensive, and that itself may lead to carbon emission and all of those things. So is there a, how do you say, are we going, so do we need to take it? You are going to make, so this is just a comment. This is just a comment, but I would like to open up for discussion, questions.
No, that is
from
a
students,
I mean, that's a huge issue, because as we are developing these technologies, this requires a lot of data centers. The amount of data, the management of this data requires, data centers that are, in fact, going to be the largest and are already becoming the largest sources of energy consumption. And the big challenge is that instead of solving climate change problems, we're actually going to worsen it. So, but the thing is that, each of these things, there are better solutions. Now, even with data centers, there are various things that people are thinking about. Data centers generate a lot of heat because of the intense use of energy. And if you can place these data centers near, residential areas which require heat, you can actually take the heat from there and use it to heat homes. And so in the US, they're thinking about how you can place data centers near places that have a demand for heat. The challenge is nobody wants to live next to a data center. So there are solutions, there are also problems in implementing those solutions. And so, with any technology, no technology is really a silver bullet, and you have to manage the risks associated with those technologies through appropriate policies and regulations and incentives. And that requires a whole, a separate discussion on the political will to do that and how, making that happen. But yeah.
So yeah, thank you so much. Thank you. So floor is open. Can you please introduce yourself?
I'm Rashani. I'm a teacher in CRC SIS. Very enlightening lecture. I just wanted to tell you that my real cousin, he's working on drone and all, and he's teaching with the name of Clear Skies to all the students to learn agricultural drone. And very successfully, we've been, even I'm involved in that in another way. We are trying to get a project also. He's placed in Bangalore. And now 25 students are already have taken the certification course there. There are challenges, but I just wanted your help also. I'll talk to you separately. The only challenge what we see is people who are learning it. Application is very difficult when they are going back to their villages and they are trying to teach them and want to, that is the real challenge which we are working with the government also. And I'm also planning to get a project on this somewhere. I have given a listing because it was really interesting when I saw him doing it. So this Clear Skies is in Bangalore, and I would ask your also like you also come there and give us some kind of more initiative to learn more how to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the challenges which we are facing, which he is facing basically is to how to tell the farmers, to take that thing in them.
Take that
That
step.
is the main.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean the thing is, it's interesting. Like agriculture, even though as a it's a risky business. So farmers, I mean, are obviously who are in this are they know how to deal with risk. They're dealing with risk every day because. But on the other hand, they're also they're very cautious. Jump into new technologies. It takes a lot of time, and that's true pretty much everywhere. That's where like we do a lot of research trying to understand how to motivate farmers to adopt these kind of technologies, which seem to make a lot of sense but are not adopted. And I think one of the things that we find is that they, at least I haven't worked with Indian farmers, but in the U.S., farmers prefer to listen to each other and to their neighbors and their friends rather than listening to university people or the scientists because they trust their community more than they trust the outsiders. And so if they see their neighbors and other people around them doing it and they see the benefits, then they're more likely to also do it. So if you look at, we've actually used this satellite data to look at adoption of certain technologies over time. Over like a 10-year period, you can use the satellites to figure out, which farmers grew certain types of crops and all that. And you can actually see that the adoption of these spread in clusters. It didn't like just spread everywhere. It started in a few places, and then those places grew, and those hotspots grow. And so I think, and all the surveys that we do for farmers suggest that there's a lot of this, what their peers are doing, what the neighboring farmers are doing has a big role. So,
Any other? Yes, please.
Ma'am, my name is Shantanu and I'm PhD first year candidate at Center for Canadian, US and Latin American Studies. Ma'am, my question to you is, in US we see there are very large land holdings, but in India, more than 85% of farmers are small and marginal farmers. So how do we see AI helping this less techy, less resource and small and marginal farmers? And ma'am, isn't the lack of land consolidation a major hindrance of applying AI in case of India? Thank you, ma'am.
Would you like to take a few more
yeah,
questions?
maybe we could do that.
If there is
Okay,
more
sure.
question, please
Yeah.
go ahead. Yeah. So first, Pranav, and then Ashwin.
Hello, ma'am. My name is Aman. I am doing my PhD from CSRD. I just want to add some points on this question only. That yes, 85% of like farmers in India are small and marginal farmers. Plus, ma'am, India's agriculture is very much labor intensive. It is not very much mechanized. Also, ma'am, our agriculture budget, like more than 60% of our agriculture budget goes to subsidy only. So, ma'am, like how do we think it is going to help? Like how AI is going to be useful for India? Because like it is going to have like equity issue and like labor will be displaced and so many other things are also.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Rashmi.
Thank you so much for that very nice enlightening talk. I'm Rashmi Barwa. I teach at the Center for International Trade and Development. So my question was actually related to Vaishali.
There's a potential that the development of these technologies can, if accompanied by suitable educational skills and so on, could create higher value jobs, which may be more involved in managing this equipment, developing the equipment, repairing the equipment, and so on, and not doing the standard farm work, which is, I mean, we know that's not, with all the, for various reasons, that's obviously not raising them out of the poverty. So there is a potential for this, and that may not be realized right away, but it's something that I think we have to also think about, like, a few decades from now. India has modernized so much, and it's no longer what it was in the 60s. So if we look ahead, we have to figure out a way to kind of look at alternate. I mean, India, we have 60% of the population is actually employed in agriculture, and as the country develops, we know that that path is going to be one where there is going to be a reduction in agricultural labor force and an increase in urbanization and services, and that's sort of the way that all developed countries follow. So one way to do that is by releasing labor from agriculture and finding other ways to occupy them in higher valued activities. So of course, I mean, this is, to be done. There's many questions on how, when, and whether and when it'll happen, but preventing the tech, I mean, you can never stop sort of technological evolution, and we have to figure out how best to cope with it and use it to the advantage. And that's the challenge. Yeah.
Yes, you're very correct. We have done in 5, 7 places where we have the people who are busy doing all those menial jobs. They have started working for like mixing minerals, taking out and putting it in the drone, and then learning how to apply and all that. So it is going on. I think it's good because when we started with even taking up WhatsApp also, we had a lot of inhibitions. But then each and every maid also, she's talking with her people. We're sitting here working here. So I have seen that development. But yeah, we need to have that encouragement for those people, and also we have to work that way.
Yeah.
So it's going on. So it's doing well.
And the issue about like fertilizer subsidies is one of those. I mean, it's given for obvious reasons to help the farmers, but what if you could give a technology that gives them higher yield with less fertilizer? So there are ways to think about it differently, but a lot needs to happen, not only academically and scientifically, but at political levels. These are huge issues. They're not easy to do, but as academics, we can sit here and sort of dream about it. So
I think Sangeeta has a comment or question.
So thank you, Madhu, for this very excellent and insightful lecture and walking us through the potential and challenges of new advanced technologies in AI in agriculture, especially in improving the precision of input applications. Well, I also take this opportunity to thank our Dean, Professor Madhu, and Professor Preeti Singh and the entire team for this wonderful initiative, which gives us an opportunity for scholarly exchange and listening to very distinguished speakers. I will just say a few words about Madhu's work before I come to my question. So, as per the article by Kathleen Sagerson, which and co-authors, which appeared in the Journal of Applied Economic Perspective and Policy, Madhu's work has expanded and broadened the field of agricultural economics by bringing in environmental and resource concerns. She has pioneered in environmental policy design, especially in voluntary approaches to pollution control. She started working on voluntary approaches when there was none of the literature and nobody was working on it. Not only she is at the frontier of cutting edge research, but she has also played an important leadership role in the profession. She is one of the very few women who became president of American Association of Agricultural Economics and also became editor of the top journal, American Journal of Agricultural Economics. And despite all her achievements, she is very accessible. She has mentored so many scholars and even many scholars from SIS. I think some of those will be here in the audience, but she's always trying there. So thank you very much for accepting our invitation and being here. My question is, a little bit related to what has been already talked about, that our farmers are resource poor and they may not have money to even purchase fertilizers and pesticides, and they're thinking about accurate precision applying them. But given those things, maybe there is what I want to bring about, maybe there is a greater role for the state and the government to provide more education not only in terms of getting enrollment in schools, but actually learning and to be able to follow instructions, to comprehend these issues, to provide intranet or internet infrastructure all over India. So as we said that mobile everybody has, but access to internet is not that much there in India, and maybe there's a need for government to be more, you know, to provide that infrastructure. And also, so as I see these technologies, I would like to categorize them into two categories. Some of these are app-based, which require low cost and, affordability and accessibility is better. But some of these technologies are like drone, they require huge investment and a fixed cost. So maybe the policy could be different for which kind of technology we are talking about. It will be easier for farmers to access app-based technology and one technology, and I have had some, seen some evidence that, especially the one where you can take a picture of the disease that your plant is having, and within an hour or so, some solution will come. So that kind of a technology, I think, is really really useful, because you know, how to cure your plant, how to just get rid of diseases. And here, I would also like to just bring to your attention, there is a scheme called Nano Drone Didi. This has been employed in India, and this provides drone to women self-help groups, and over 15,000 such self-help groups have been provided drones, and some training to be able to drive these drones, and that's, let's see how successful that is. So already government has started providing these services and trying to support AI in India.
Yeah. No, thanks for those kind words, Geeta. Um, so the thing with, I mean, even with these, you're right that there are some that are app based and anybody can access them with a mobile phone. But the interesting thing is that even for these like drones or tractors and so on, you can actually just rent them for the time you don't need to buy them. It's like Uber. You don't need a car anymore. You just use them as you need them. And so it doesn't matter if I mean, yes, of course, the very, very poor farmers won't be able to do it. But for the other farmers, I mean, there are rich farmers also in India. And so there is, even they don't need to buy the equipment. Even in India, I mean, actually in the US, you probably cannot rent as easily as it seemed to be. There's an article in New York Times about how you can rent a tractor like Uber in India. So you just look at the thing and you say, I want it now, and you can, so those kind of services will become available to deal with the demand situation in a particular country. Now, whether that happens depends so much on, is the technology being developed locally to deal with local needs, or is it coming, from like Monsanto and other places? There's a lot that needs to happen to make sure that it is useful here. But there's a promise there right now. Whether it'll be achieved or not remains to be seen. So that is
one thing that has a concern for me is this privacy issue, because once marketers have data, one doesn't know how it will be used.
Yeah.
And you don't want to be in a situation where our farmers are exploited even more because somebody knows their vulnerability. And
I agree, but we all use the cell phone. The cell phone is subject to exactly the same. It has all the information. Now the cell phone has, I mean, my car runs on the cell phone, my computer, everything. I cannot access my university account without having my cell phone to validate it. So all the information is right there. We are giving that information voluntarily because we value the benefits we get from it. And so, but that is a risk. You're trusting that somebody is looking after that and will not, misuse it. But it is a real risk. And especially, when we see, for example, what's happening in the US now, is they start trying to dismantle regulations, they get rid of the Environmental Protection Agency, the Nuclear Agency, and all of that. And it falls in the hands of completely the private sector and unregulated, then all those dangers really do increase. So that is certainly an issue. And that's one of the big reasons why farmers will be hesitant to Yeah.
Because incentives to misuse data
Yeah.
are huge.
That is right. That is right.
Incentives are already
Yeah.
there.
And one of the other, just one last point, the other thing about AI technologies is that it feeds on data. The only way to improve AI technologies is by sharing data from millions of users, because this machine learning algorithm requires millions of terabytes of information to be able to understand the patterns and to figure out what causes what. It cannot just work with one farmer's data. So you cannot learn from one farmer's field. You need to combine data from millions of fields to figure out what the pattern and relationships are. So it benefits from these network externalities. And if you don't have that, then the technology is not going to improve. So there is this, sort of catch 22, because you need the data, but at the same time you have risks if you give up your data. So.
Yeah, thank you. We are coming to a close of this session. I would like to hand over to Preeti.
No, I just had a very small comment.
Yes,
If at all.
okay.
Uh,
Okay.
All right. No, I just wanted to thank you really, because my query was more about the applicability, and I think a lot of people have already asked that question in India of these technologies. But I was listening to your lecture. You made it pretty clear that there are digital applications are already a success. I think in India, and there is a lot of potential, especially given the range of technology that you were talking about. So and my pointed query was about how actively the government is doing anything, especially in India. But I think Sangeeta has partially also answered that question, and Vaishali also mentioned that they are taking help of the government. So I assume the government is interested and actively doing something. I don't know how much has actually been done on ground. So that was really what. And as far as Indians are concerned, I think we are quite innovative. So
Absolutely.
as far as technology is concerned.
Yes, I agree.
Rajita?
Yes, I'll just add to what Preeti has said, and I'm not so optimistic because of the federal setup that we have in India. So there are issues with the federal setup. So the central-state relations are not very healthy, and in that sense, those states which do not have a matching government with the center, they have problems related to funding and all. So that may be one challenge. Then if you look at the other, flip side of the adoption of AI, high cost, you've already mentioned, lack of technical expertise. And data management, if I may just add, that the data is very biased at times and fragmented. So collating and putting them together to churn out, logical data becomes a problem in India. And one thing that you also mentioned is that it requires constant calibration. Like if we have this technology today, it may become redundant in a year. So for that kind of an adoption, we are not so well equipped, right? And the last one that I would like to add is that the wealth divide, the income divide is increasing. And I come from a farmer's family, so I see how this new generation has been coming even back from United States or United Kingdom, and they are very good at it, and they have the advantage. And they more often than not, they lease out things from the poor farmers because of the skills that they have. So that income divide is widening because of the use of AI.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, I think just I guess in even in the US, I mean, everything you mentioned, the thing about the possibility of obsolescence of these technologies, because these technologies are changing so rapidly and the development is so fast that there's always the risk that you may adopt the version today, but by tomorrow that's outdated and something new has come up. So that's a big reason why the tendency is to delay and to wait, and and I mean, even though we talk about adoption in India is sort of challenging, but if you look at some of these technologies, even in the US, not I mean, precision farming technologies, leave alone AI, just precision farming technologies have been available since the mid 1990s. And for many of them, the adoption rates are still 20 to 30% only. I mean, US farmers are also very slow to adopt, and for various reasons. You know, one of the things in the US, and I don't, you know, in India probably is not the case, but in the US, the average farmer is now about 60 years old. And so they are not interested in it's, you know, only the younger farmers are more willing to and able to adapt these kind of new technologies. So that's another factor. And then the other reason, and even though we may think that, you know, the US has large farmers, but a large percentage, 60 to 70% of the land that is farmed in the US is not owned by the farmer. They are tenants. The owners of the land are often living in urban areas. They are absentee landlords. And the tenants don't have the security of tenure because their leases can be canceled. They don't have that long-term security, and they cannot do anything which will hinder the profitability, and, you know, they cannot pay the rent. So that's a major limitation to adoption of these kind of innovative technologies that are risky and may reduce short-run profitability for long-term gain and all that, because they may not be the farmer on that land, you know, 5-10 years later. So each country has its own challenges, which limits adoption of many of these technologies. And so a whole interesting topic on that.
Yeah, thank you very much for this very, very stimulating discussion and touching upon both sides of technology. I would like to invite my colleague, Dr. Rashmi Borua, to offer a vote of thanks before we close this session.
Thank you, Professor Madhu Khanna, for this very, very relevant, timely talk. Not just for all of you, but also for me, because I'm teaching labor demand today in my class later in the afternoon. And I know that I'll be spending some time talking about this. I mean, for those of you who are not familiar. So, you know, when we talk about wage inequality, the first thing we always talk about is labor demand. You know, how demand changes and how that affects inequality in wages. So that was going to be my topic today, about skilled and unskilled labor. So this would definitely add a lot of content to that. So thank you for that. You know, for also you're in India, and I'm sure very busy with your other projects, your work with Sangeeta perhaps, and you know, I know that you have personal engagements too. So thank you for taking the time to deliver this important lecture, which is the 10th lecture in this series, which I cannot, you know, continue without thanking the Dean, Professor Amitabh Bhattu, for also initiating, you know, this year has been very enlightening, at least since last October actually, with some amazing talks, including your own. I also want to thank Mandira Sharma, Professor Mandira Sharma for chairing the session and you know, sharing her important tidbits during this talk as well. And you know, those who are at the background of organizing this talk, you know, Professor Preeti Singh, who's effortlessly does this. You know, I'm in awe always how it happens so smoothly. You know, Dr. Shakti here, who ensures that you know, these talks are not just for this community here, but also you know, goes out to a very broader community, and very seamlessly it happens. So thank you every time for doing that. To the students who always are here, the volunteers, to help with everything, and of course thank you to the participants, to the faculty who are here to attend the talk. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you.